You told a lie sometime in the last 24 hours, maybe a small one, a social convenience, something that cost almost nothing and made a moment easier. We'll come back to that because the lie you told today is connected to something that was happening on this planet long before the first human stood upright, long before the first word was spoken, long before anything we would recognize as a mind existed at all. And understanding that connection will permanently change how you see yourself. There is a flower in the Mediterranean that has never produced nectar, not once, not in any season, not in any recorded instance, and yet bees land on it, convinced somehow that what they are approaching is real. They leave with nothing, and the flower does not notice their departure. This has been happening for approximately 10 million years, before the first human stood upright, before the first word was spoken, before anything we would recognize as a mind existed on this planet. Something was already lying, and it was winning. Most people, when they imagine the first lie, imagine a person, a specific human moment, a prehistoric hunter claiming a kill that wasn't his, a chief inventing a story to hold power over people who couldn't question them. That image is wrong, because deception is not something humans invented. It is something far older and far more deeply embedded in the architecture of life. What deception requires is this: a signal that creates a false belief in another organism and benefits the sender at the cost of the receiver. That is the complete definition. And when you hold that definition up against the natural world, something very uncomfortable becomes visible. Life has been doing this since almost the beginning. In 1975, researchers studying orchid populations in southern Europe noticed something that didn't fit their models. Certain orchid species were being pollinated at rates that made no biological sense. They offered pollinators absolutely nothing in return. No nectar, no nutritional benefit of any kind. The bees kept coming anyway. It took years to understand why. The orchids had evolved across millions of years of selection to mimic with extraordinary precision the exact visual and chemical signature of flowers that did offer rewards. They had learned, without learning, to lie. The lie was written into their physical form, into the specific wavelengths of color their petals reflected. Evolution had discovered deception before evolution had discovered brains. The lie did not require a mind. It did not require intent. It did not require anything we would recognize as choice. It only required one thing: that the false signal worked better than the true one. Now scale forward to the Cambrian explosion, roughly 540 million years ago, the moment life on Earth discovered eyes. Before vision, the ocean was a slower place. Then eyes appeared, and with eyes came something no organism had ever needed to worry about before: being seen. Within an extraordinarily short evolutionary window, camouflage appears in the fossil record. Body shapes that suggest objects that are not food, not threat, not alive. But the arms race had already begun, and the first weapon in that arms race, before teeth grew larger or claws grew sharper, was the lie. Now move closer into something with a nervous system, into something that can want. Researchers studying cuttlefish behavior in the 1990s documented something that stopped them cold. A male cuttlefish competing with a larger dominant male for access to a female was observed doing something that had no precedent in invertebrate behavioral literature. On the side of his body facing the female, he displayed the full chromatic pattern of a sexually interested male. On the side facing his rival, simultaneously, he displayed the drab neutral coloration of a female. Two different signals, two different audiences at the same time. Wait, let's be honest about what that means. A creature with no prefrontal cortex, no language, no self-awareness as we understand it, was running a more sophisticated social deception than most humans consciously manage. The cuttlefish had modeled two different minds, predicted what each would need to see, and fed each of them a different version of reality. Simultaneously, something had changed. The lie had become social. It had moved from the passive architecture of a flower petal into a basic theory of what another creature was likely to believe. Chimpanzees deceive. This has been documented across decades of behavioral research. A subordinate male, aware that a dominant male is watching, will suppress every behavioral signal of interest when a female approaches. He has modeled what happens when that dominant male sees those signals. He has predicted the outcome, and he has produced false information to redirect that outcome in his favor. In 2006, researchers documented a chimpanzee leading his group in the wrong direction, away from food he had already located, before doubling back alone once the others had moved off. He knew where the food was. He concealed that knowledge. Then he used the gap between what others believed and what he knew to serve his own interest. The researchers called it tactical deception. What they had observed in a chimpanzee in an enclosure was something humans had been doing in every culture, in every recorded society in history, for reasons that turned out to be far older than language itself. The lie had become strategic, social, political, a tool not just for survival against predators, but for navigating relationships, alliances, hierarchies, the complex arithmetic of who owes what to whom. Now here is where the story gets strange, really strange. Decades of serious research on human deception keeps arriving at the same conclusion. Most people expect the research to say lying is an aberration, a bug in an otherwise cooperative system. That is not what the research says. The research says the capacity for deception and the capacity to detect deception co-evolve together as a system. The same pressures that made it advantageous to deceive also made it advantageous to catch deception, which made it necessary to deceive more subtly, which made detection more sophisticated. And what this implies is disturbing in a very specific way. It implies that some significant portion of human cognitive complexity may have been driven not by cooperation, but by the evolutionary arms race between lying and catching liars. We may be as intelligent as we are, in part because we have been deceiving each other for so long that only the best liars and the best lie detectors survived long enough to pass on their genes. Think about that. Language arrives late in this story. Somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 years ago, modern human language emerges, and with it, something no orchid, no cuttlefish, no chimpanzee could ever access. The ability to lie about things that don't exist. The orchid lies about nectar, the cuttlefish lies about identity, the chimpanzee lies about knowledge. All of these are lies about the present, about what is real right now, in the immediate physical world. Language made it possible to lie about the past, about the future, about invisible things, intentions, promises, the internal states of other minds, about entities that exist nowhere except in the shared imagination of the people who believe in them. The moment language arrived, the space of possible deceptions expanded from what could be physically mimicked to literally anything that could be said. The lie had found its final form. Researchers who study the development of lying in children have noticed something that consistently unsettles them. Children begin lying at approximately 2 to 3 years of age. The first lie you ever told, you were probably 2 years old, and nobody taught you how. The behavior emerges spontaneously, cross-culturally, in children with no exposure to each other on roughly the same developmental timeline. And here is the part that matters most. The children who lie earliest and most effectively tend to score higher on measures of social cognition, on theory of mind, on the ability to model what another person is thinking. The best liars at age 3 are also the children best at understanding other minds, because it is the same skill. To deceive someone, you must first model their beliefs accurately enough to know which false signal will subvert them. The lie is, structurally, this is the deepest discomfort the research produces. Not that humans lie, that was never surprising, but that the cognitive capacity that makes us most human, the ability to imagine the inner life of another person, to reach across the gap between two minds and understand what someone else is feeling, is the exact same capacity that makes deception possible. Compassion and manipulation share the same architecture. They always have. So, the lie you told in the last 24 hours, a small one, most likely a social convenience, something that cost almost nothing and resolved a moment that might otherwise have become complicated. You did not feel in that moment that you were participating in something ancient, but the capacity you used, the modeling of another mind, the prediction of what they would believe, the selection of a signal designed to produce a false impression, that capacity was not invented by culture or language or civilization. It was refined by them. The original version was pressed into the physical structure of a flower by millions of years of selection that rewarded false signals and punished true ones. And somewhere right now, in a field in the Mediterranean, a bee is landing on a flower that has never, not once, offered it anything, and believing completely that this time will be different